how does being good betray actually doing good?
I think we get caught up in an idea of what good is rather than actual activity of being ethical or activity that is good. So, the idea of being good, or my idea or somebody else's idea of what it means to be a good person, rather than can I just act out the appropriate response in this moment, that it lives in accord with what my vows or my ethics are. Like, I think that we get caught up on the ideas and we get trapped by them. Where if we instead just try to respond appropriately in each moment, like that's how you don't get caught up in that idea of good.
How can your body help you connect with your inner self?
So bodies are really fascinating because they're not separate from our emotions or our mind. And they're not separate from this moment. Like, the great things about bodies are that they automatically only get experienced right now. You can't experience your body yesterday, and you can't experience your body tomorrow. You might have a memory or a fantasy, but that's not experiencing. So when you bring your attention to your body, when you take up residence in your body, and you are able to rest there quietly and find a place of rest and quiet, however that lives in your body. Like, some people want to give instructions about following your breath, other people about feeling your feet, other people, like, find a way to connect to your body and the physical experience of this moment, and that will automatically help you have a connection to the emotional experience of this moment. And hopefully that leads you into a place of finding a way to be quiet in all of that, so that answers, the internal life happens automatically. I mean, think about when you have a really great orgasm, right? Like, there's a way in which it's so physical that everything arrives in that moment, right? And you're just like, wow, like, your heart's open, but also like your mind is sort of free and your body's kind of free. Like, that is possible on a regular basis without necessarily having to have sex to do it. And that comes through connecting to what's my body? Where's my body? How is it in this moment? And when we have big emotional things, like we have the experience of someone hurting our feelings, or grief or anger or loss or whatever, like, my first response is always like, where is it in my body? Like, where is it located? Because then I get to start to feel a way to create space around it so that I can let it inform me. And once it starts to inform me, I can start to develop the skillful response. So today I want to welcome my friend and compadre and somebody I've always enjoyed teaching with, my great friend Rod Owens, Lama Rod Owens, and activist, author, fantastic queer guy, smashing the patriarchy with me over and over and over again. And so welcome, Rod. We're really glad you could join us today.
Yeah, me too. It's nice to be here.
And how are you holding up? Like, you know, as a Dharma teacher, you and I both sort of have, like, I what I love about teaching with you is we both engage with the group in the same kind of way, which is energetically and connecting and letting the co-creations of each moment happen, which I find is much more difficult in this shelter-in-place Zoom world we live in now.
Yeah.
And so how is it for you?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I just hop on these online virtual spaces and I just kind of like go with it. I feel as if I can still connect to people even through this technology. I can still feel people, and tune into people. And it's been really, it's helped me because I don't have to spend a lot of energy trying to get places and be places. And, I just sit down in my room, in my practice space, I turn on the computer and I just start talking. And like, it's just like, it's brilliant.
Yeah. Because your schedule, man, like you used to travel so much. Yeah. Your schedule would exhaust me. Sometimes I hear, I pay attention to what you're doing and it would just be like, holy cow, how does he have the energy for that? Mm-hmm. And then I realized like I'm 10 or 15 years older than you.
Right. Well, yeah, I think, for me, I just kind of had to do that.
Yeah.
For a bit. And I think the quarantine has really helped me to understand that like I have to transition from that lifestyle because I want to have stability.
Right.
As a teacher. And I'm at a place where people can come to me now. But I loved, and to an extent I still love, like the traveling, the meeting people, going from place to place, and it's helped me to build the audience and the platform that I have now. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm appreciative of that. And now I'm older and I want to do things that like people do. Like I want to have like this being at home for 3 months. I have forgotten what it was like to have a routine, because every day while on the road is just different.
Yeah.
And I was living all last year, I was living also in Atlanta too. So I was living in Boston and Atlanta. If I weren't in either of these places, I was on the road or in another country, but just being at home and just sleeping in your bed day after day.
Yeah.
Now of course, like the thing that sucks is that like I can't have anyone else in my bed right now. But just getting into a routine, I just think it's been the most amazing thing. And also like, I realized that, there's a lot of privilege for me, like in this position, like I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of, other people to look out for in my living environment, and I'm also really fortunate that like people, really rallied to make sure that I was being cared for.
Right.
And that's made the difference.
Yeah.
For me.
That is true. Like everywhere that I travel, I'm, I used to joke that like in San Francisco, I'm, people could care less. But everywhere, you show up at these Dharma centers or you show up in these places and they make you feel like a rock star in some kind of way, right? And so, there is this way in which they're so excited and so glad that you're there and they take care of you in so many great ways. And at the same time, there is definitely, for me anyway, as much as I love all of that and love to travel, I really love being home.
Yeah.
Like I love my house. I'm a nester.
Yes.
So, so it's very much like that. So I want to get to your book though, which is out now.
Yep.
Love and Rage. And I've read it 3 times. And
I'm sorry.
No, it's awesome, man. It's really good. And what I love about it is that it's completely focused on practice, right? Like you're carrying some big messages here,
Yeah.
and really, but it comes from this place where it's like on every page I just see your practice over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not so like sometimes, you know, you pick up these Dharma books and it's just like, it's either super woo-woo, or it's super heady, or, you know, something like it's just not really approachable. But your book is so amazingly approachable, and knowing you as well as I do, it was so great because I just got to, I got to see new sides of you. But also see, I got to see deeper into the parts of you that I love so much. Right? Like this big open heart, this generosity, and a true sort of effort to stay embodied, right?
Yes.
Like you and I share that in our practice, right? Our practice is embodiment. And so I want to start actually with a quote, because the first time I read the book, this actually stopped me in my tracks. This idea, sometimes being a good person or my attachment to being a good person actually gets in the way of me looking at all the rough spots, at all the shadows that I'm working with. And I want to unpack that a little bit, partially because I think as a white person who tries to, you know, deal with and align myself with liberation and justice and support for my friends who are people of color, and, you know, smashing the patriarchy, yay for my shirt. You know, there is a part of me that sort of would get, and not so much anymore, but used to be like, I was caught up trying to be a good person. Right? And that would actually sort of impede my growth in actually finding my place in the movement and in these movements and in the practice of liberation. And so maybe how is that for you, right? Like I know how it is for me as a white guy. And I think it's common in, like, I can almost, you see it and people, it's like, oh, you're in that place now, right? I can see it. And it's like, oh, you're really, okay, here's a cookie, now sit down, let's have a chat.
Exactly.
But how is it for you that, because I was really fascinated at first, like, well, what does it mean for Rod to be a good person?
Well, you know, I think about what it means to be called a good guy. You know, and I've heard that quite often. Oh, Rod, you're one of the good guys. You're a good guy. And I've heard that for years. And that's really where that kind of like reflection came from. And I thought, but am I a good guy? No, you know, because there are obviously times where I'm not good.
Right.
You know, and then that broke it open for me. And I was like, oh, like maybe it's not about occupying this position of being good. Maybe it's about coming back to the moment and saying, I'm going to do whatever I can in this moment to practice what is ethical, what is good. And I may not even get it right. You know, but then the moment can pass, I can look back and reflect, and then I can learn something from it and I keep going. You know, it's, you know, it's like what my teacher used to say all the time is that, like, you know, you keep falling down, but you keep getting up. And that's how I relate to that teaching. You know, it's not about always standing up, but it's about how I choose to get back up from falling down. And that's how I practice being good or being ethical in each moment, you know. But there's so many people, you know, they're really attached to that, you know. And, you know, I just feel like it makes sense because, we're always trying to avoid suffering. You know, and if you're just good, you're like, okay, maybe I can just take a break. Maybe I can just be virtuous and good. I don't have to create violence and harm. I don't have to offend anyone, you know, and I get that, but you're not going to grow there. You know, you're not going to grow from a position of being good, but if you just come back to the moment, there's a lot of space that's happening in that moment, and I'm just interested in that.
Right.
You know, it's just, you have to get, when you're doing this work of liberation, like you have to understand that it's not about being applauded.
Right.
You know, you're not going to get a parade, you're not going to get a cookie, you know.
You're not even gonna get a T-shirt, man.
You're not going to get a T-shirt. You're like, you know, and it's like, I know so many of us are just wanting that attention.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my God, I made a really good decision. I'm an ally. I'm this and that. I wish someone would look at me. And I tell people, that's not how this goes.
Right.
Like, it's a lot of this work is unseen. It's invisible. You know, and like but you have to develop gratitude in your own practice where you're saying, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can. I feel like I'm doing my work, and you just have to, that has to be enough for you, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And I try to be invisible. It's like that old teaching, that old teaching, I think, that comes out of like some Buddhist tradition, where it's like, try to do like kindness, try to be kind, but try to be invisible, or try to be unseen where you're doing like kindness. And that way, that disrupts the ego.
Right.
You know.
Well, and you know, it also, like, I think about my own life and all of the growth moments that I've had, those moments of like, where I feel like, oh my God, I grew up a little bit. I got a little maturity there, right? All of those come from places where I screwed up, right? Mm-hmm. And often, you know, I did something and showed my ass and just like got called to the carpet by people who love me, you know, and like, I can't think of a single moment in my life that growth has happened because I did something well.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
And so, and it makes me think, like, for me, that moment came when one of those really great moments is, you know, in your first book with Jasmine and Angel, Jasmine says something to the effect of, you know, this work of liberation is really messy, but luckily we have a lot of mops and buckets, or mops and sponges.
Yeah.
And I love that line so much because it just opens up. And this, in this line too, opens up and gives us so much permission to just face who you, like, face yourself, face your own history, face, you know, and I think the way this relates to the rage and anger stuff, like, you know, so many times I get told like, oh, you're so angry, or you're so, because I kind of have good boundaries and, you know, I enforce them. And also because I, you know, I'm not afraid to sort of go up to people, I don't really care their position, and say, you know, that's not right.
Yeah.
And so I get called angry a lot. And at first it was, and at first I sort of was angry, right? Like, I was a gay guy who survived the 70s and 80s and was grieving and lost everybody I know and loved. And so, yeah, I was really angry. And, you know, my practice actually helped me with that because I learned how to hold that and be with that. But part of that comes from this permission to be angry. Yeah. And once I have that permission, it's like, oh yeah, I cannot be dragged around by it. Yeah. And I think that's what you're saying here too, right? Like,
yeah.
Just own your suffering a little bit.
You own it, yeah. That's, you know, so many of us we've never been raised believing that we have a right to anything about who we are, to our emotions, to our mind, to our bodies. And that's the experience of so many marginalized folks in the world.
Right.
You know, this is why, so I set up I have this whole like meditation sequence called Snow, you know, and I worked really hard to like come up with a different name for it, but Snow was the best that I could do, you know.
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
You know, and I was working with, I had a small working group for a bit called Liberation Through Anger Working Group, a small group of QT BIPOC activists. And they formed around just like me, you know. And it was after I left the Radical Dharma Collective here in Boston. And then they kind of were like, oh, you seem like a free agent now. So, And we worked a little bit together. And in a meeting one night, I was going through a lot of these teachings. I started with them, and they were like, we want to own our anger. Like, we don't want to bypass it. We can't give it up until we own it. And I was like, oh, that's the piece that's missing, and that's the piece that's not in any kind of meditation sequence, particularly that we all own it. Like, I am angry. And that felt like liberation for me. Like, I am angry. I have to see this before I can let it go. I have to own it. Like, this is me. Right here, and then I can let it go and offer it back, but like some of us have to go through claiming the anger. But again, if you claim the anger, then you're not going to be a good person anymore.
Well, but what's interesting to me is that by claiming it no longer like, as long as it stayed in the shadows, like, it would drag me around, because I would snap at people. And certainly wasn't super skillful when I would confront people. And I think about ACT UP, right? Like, we were like, the biggest complaint from other queer people was, oh my God, you're so angry. And it's like, well, you need to be angry. It's the only way we're getting attention. And but like, as I grew older, I started to see that, like, it was also eating me alive, right? Like, it was harming me as much as it was a force for movement, right? And a force for energy to move forward in my activism. And I think about your description of being you're over 6 feet tall, a black man, a large black man, and how you couldn't be angry because that, as a bigger black man, that's dangerous for you.
Yes, exactly. It's anywhere in the country, absolutely, but definitely in the South, where a whole narrative has been built around the angry black man that functions to keep us silenced and repressed and disciplined. And so I learned early on, it was like, there's no way that I could ever pull this off. So then it became passive aggressiveness, right? And then of course I was lucky to begin meditation, and my elders were like, well, you need to pay attention to that. And then it was a process of summoning this anger back, and I was like, well, fuck, I'm angry. I am like fucking pissed off, and I covered it up. I'd covered it up with these layers of being nice and being kind and being everyone's like favorite black friend. I felt like I was just like in this perpetual episode of the Cosby Show, right? I was just like, I'm safe. Like, I'm a safe black guy. Like, let's be friends. I'm not gonna lose it. I'm not gonna call you out. I'm just gonna like do emotional labor for you and make you laugh. And do all that stuff.
Ignore all your microaggressions.
I'll ignore all of that. My life is a sitcom.
Right. And I just like the courage of that, like, to just go, no, I'm out.
This integrity. It's the integrity. Like, no, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. These are my experiences. And I just don't settle. Anymore. So many of us are settling. And many of us are getting disrupted now, which is wonderful to see, but like I thrive in communities of transgression. You talk about like the courage, like when I started, in my early 20s, I started getting invited into trans communities and trans gatherings, and I had never had trans friends before, and I started making them, and they would be like, come to this event, come and do this thing, come to this bar, whatever it was, and I went, and I walked in, and it was like, no, I'm here like to support the community. I'm here to learn. I'm here to build relationships, with folks, and I'm also here being taught.
Yeah.
because people were teaching me, no, baby, this is how you live in the world when the world wants you dead.
Right.
There were people who would just be coming out. They're like, okay, this is who I am. I would be like, you walk around the public like that.
Right.
Like, and I just sat there just in awe. And I just learned. I was like, oh, this is what it means.
Right.
Just be yourself and say, fuck it, fuck you, fuck everyone else. I'm privileging what I need in this moment, and you know what? I'm going to meet the violence.
Yeah.
And that's another part of the courage. Like, but yeah, it's like there are consequences.
Right.
And that's what we have to mourn as well, are the consequences as we continue to work.
Right. And we mourn the consequences, but also name them and don't let them disappear into some kind of performative moment.
Yeah.
Right. Like, one more corporation sends out a Black Lives Matter statement, while not paying their employees a living wage.
Exactly.
Many of whom are people of color. It's like,
exactly.
Okay, Black Lives Matter, except for these Black lives that work for me.
Exactly. And we're just doing this because everyone else is doing it and we want to look good.
Right, because we don't want you to boycott us.
Exactly. Exactly.
And yeah, so I think about that, the meeting of the violence and the meeting of, if it doesn't cost you anything, are you really here? Are you really in it?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what's at stake for you?
Right.
That's I'm always thinking about that. Okay, what if I don't do this?
Right.
Can I live with that?
Yeah. What if I don't agree with the patriarchy in this moment?
Yeah.
The toxic masculinity that I got taught.
Yeah.
What if I just disrupt that and let myself be a big queen?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I also feel as if, I owe something to my descendants, to the next generations coming. It's like, if I don't do what I need to do, then I create all this work for them, and I wonder if there weren't Sylvia Rivera or Marsha P. Johnson, or Comptons or Stonewall, like, where would we be?
Right.
If they didn't do that work for us.
Right.
And what were and act up, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like all of it. Like,
all of it. Yeah. For these great movements, these people who were organizing and putting their life on the line, many of them lost their lives.
Right.
Because they were doing the work. Like, what if I don't do that, then am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, aren't they charging us to continue the work?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we don't inspire the other generations to, like, what was the point of my life then? And this is how I think every day. Like, I talk about, using a moment to decide how to practice goodness. This is what happens when you do that. It's like, okay, like, I need to do my work.
Right.
I need to do this work because I'm part of a lineage.
Yeah.
And I'm alive because people have done work, and I ensure the life of others after me when I do the work now.
Right.
And people just forget that.
Yeah.
They're just not attuned to that.
The fact that there's so many people disrupting the Dharma right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And not letting it fall into medication.
Right. Right.
Like, I feel so much better these days. And part of it is because, once you become a disruptor, more disruptors show up and go, hey, look, let's disrupt together. So, but it does give me hope for, like, a day when, like, I don't feel any, like, there was a time in which I felt really like the Dharma was just going to wither and die, because it was not, my exposure to it was not healthy. It was, it wasn't thriving. And then I gave up my privilege and my comfort, and I took a risk, and I jumped off the plane, and I just said, I'm going to tell the truth. And all of a sudden, it's like I see all the places now where people are really committed to liberation of, and availability and accessibility, and that that the Dharma is the how.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
that's how we get to liberation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Go ahead.
No. I was just thinking, just about like it's bravery, it's courage to do that. It's also audacity and sassiness. It's and I think we're lucky because we got into this and we already had a strong sense of who we were.
Right.
Like I came into Dharma, of course I came into Tibetan practice and Tibetan tradition, and it was a lot of assimilating. Like you were like, in many ways they were trying to train you to become Tibetan. And I thought that was what they were doing. Like, but when I moved further into the process, no, they were just like, this is what we do.
Right.
But at some point you have to like figure out who you are. But a lot of the white folks just absorbed these Tibetan identities, and like I
folks.
Yeah. And I noticed that it wasn't happening for me. I was like, oh, because I already have this strong identity. Like I'm Black and queer and, I'm an activist, and those were my first dharmas.
Right.
So I wasn't interested in becoming something else. I was interested in getting free,
Well, because it took us so long to get here.
Yes, exactly.
Like I remember having a conversation with somebody, a straight white male teacher, and saying, look, I worked so hard to be me.
Yeah.
And you're trying to tell me that me needs to go away. And I don't believe that's true, because something in my heart says that's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I think those of us who had to come here and like be me and work hard to be me.
Yes.
Like that's what brings us here.
Yeah. And I think it inspires people when they see us being us, and they see people like Reverend Angel and and all the rest. There's so many of us who like challenging, disrupting Dharma, but like
Zenju and
yeah. All of us who are just like, this is who I am, this is what I do, and I think people need to see us do that, because look, there's the dominant narrative about this is what it means to be a Dharma practitioner. People come to me all the time, especially with Love and Rage being out, and they're like, oh, like this is like a different Buddhism. I was like, well, it's the same Buddhism. It's just like I'm just speaking through my identities. I'm not stepping outside of my body to do anything. I'm just staying in my body, and this is how Dharma comes through. Comes out edgy and fierce and sassy and irreverent,
and black as hell,
and black and loud, and all of that, and campy sometimes, like all of that. It's just like, it doesn't matter. Like that's still the Dharma, and I'm still, the point is to be free, to have fun, to practice the love and the compassion, not to be rigid and stoic and meek. I think it's just like, if that's who you are authentically, fine, do that. Absolutely. But like, if that's not who you are, then don't try that.
I think that's the perfect place for us to stop. I don't want to, that's such a great way, because it sums up your book to me in such a great way. And I do want to encourage everyone to get a copy of Love and Rage. And what do you have coming? Like, do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I would just say, for everyone just to visit my website. I do have, I'm in the midst of planning a course on Love and Rage, a 6-week course where I'm just kind of like taking people through the book you know, and just helping people with the practices. You know, it's going to be super accessible, and you know, so just stay tuned to my website, and we're going to start, you know, announcing that pretty soon.
And that's lamarad.org?
.com, yeah, lamarad.com.
Okay.
You know, or follow me on Instagram. You know, is also the second best place to stay tuned to things.
Yeah, because you've been doing these meditations on Instagram that I love them.
Yeah. Yeah, I was doing those pretty regularly during the quarantine, you know, and then when we go back into quarantine, I'll start those up again.
I never left. I'm still in quarantine.